Okay, how's that? Is that a little bit better, Gordon? I turned it up a couple of notches there. Okay, fine. All right. So, can everybody see the slide okay? I assume you can. The first slide here, building trader confidence and minimizing fear. Okay, good. So I think in a okay. And I will also record it too, just as a backup. Here, sponsored today by Trade Guider. I'd like to start off by welcoming everybody and expressing my thanks to both Gavin Holmes and Richard Bednall and the rest of the Trade Guider group for inviting me and inviting you all into this, I think, a pretty exciting webinar. And from the emails that I've gotten from many of the group members here, I get the sense that people find this pretty useful and helpful so far. And my intent today is to deliver some additional information in some great detail that will be even more helpful than what we did in the first session. I also want to just say thanks to the members of this group for sending in the workbook elements. Those that did. Those were the what I have given up for fear and the cost and benefits of managing fear and their personal list of valued trading behaviors. A lot of good work went into that, I could tell, and we're all going to benefit from the volunteers who did send in that information to me. And I guess two other points here. One is that just a little housekeeping item. We'll take a break in about an hour for 10 minutes because I think it's a good idea for everybody to do. And the second thing I'd like to say, I see Laura is here, and I just want to say congratulations, Laura and Gavin, for their new baby, Olivia Ann. I saw the picture, very cute little girl, and very good news for you all. So congrats on your new family member. And welcome, Olivia Ann, to the world. All right, we've got a lot of stuff to cover today. And as you know I like to start off with a quote. And I think this is a great quote for this session in this two-part webinar from Einstein, Albert. And the quote is, "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." I've always liked this quote, and we're going to talk in some depth today about a different kind of thinking that I think you'll find will be very helpful for your trading and for developing confidence and for minimizing that struggle that we all have, frankly, with anxiety and fear. But first, I just want to briefly review some of the highlights and major points of the first session. We talked about, and this is a slide from the first session, we talked about the four main factors of fear, and we use the acronym of FEAR for that. Fusion being the first, and that's responding to thoughts, words, and images, and memories, and sensations, bodily sensations, as if they are the same thing as what our mind is telling us they are. And our mind is usually telling us that what we're experiencing are real, that these are real events that are occurring. And, you know, it's just a nice, handy reminder to not always believe what our mind is telling us. And we have the acronym also in FEAR of false evidence appearing real. And that's useful to remember. We also talked a little bit about evaluation making fear and anxiety a problem for us. Evaluations of our experiences rarely add to the experience. They just serve to beat us up or get us more hooked into the experience. We talked about being hooked in like a fish. and struggling against that hook. We're struggling against the fear and the anxiety and the things that are hooking us. And we talked about beginning to notice being hooked as a useful and helpful thing for us, and then noticing what we do next. And towards the very end, we're going to talk about a very specific, towards the very end of this session, we're going to talk about a very specific perspective called the I view. And noticing what you do next and noticing your hooks are important in that view. And we'll talk more about that as we a little bit further in the session. We also talked about avoidance. Fusion and avoidance, by the way, are the two biggies in terms of what makes fear and anxiety so difficult for us. And avoidance is kind of the first line of defense against fear and anxiety, and that's just to escape from it. We want to cut and run. And that's something we all have experienced, and it's difficult for us because it's highly addictive, or it's highly reinforcing, I guess is maybe the better way to say it, because it always leads to a brief honeymoon from the fear. It gets us away from that fear. And so anything that gives us immediate relief, we're going to naturally want to do over and over and over again. But the problem is, it narrows down our responses. Our behavioral repertoire, if you will, becomes more about escape and less about trading. So we narrow our repertoire of skilled trading behaviors the more we experience and practice, if you will, escape and avoidance to get away from the fear. And also we talked a little bit about reason giving, that fear and fairly intense anxiety are good reasons not to do something. I can't pull the trigger because I can't stand the fear. The thing is that our reasons become rules, if you will, and we trade by these rules, and these again limit our repertoire of responses. We had a little, I showed you a model of how fear works for us, and particularly how avoidance works for us. We enter a trade, and we get a fearful reaction. We get that stress response. Remember the flight or fight syndrome with all that physiological and emotional and mental response that we get, and we start believing what our mind is telling us as if it's reality. So we get fused to the stress and the fear, and we want to escape that. We want to avoid that. And although it brings temporary relief, it never builds sound trading skills. It never helps us do that. What we wind up doing is we wind up building good skills in how to escape and avoid fear and reality, but over time our behavior is narrow, and we never build that good repertoire of sound, solid trading. So as Einstein suggests, we really need a different kind of thinking, and we talked a little bit about this in the first session. Here's a model that's a little bit different. When we enter a trade, we're still going to have this fearful reaction and this stress response. We can't get rid of this because it's a natural response. But through mindfulness and committed choice, and we're going to talk a lot about mindfulness and committed choice today because these are the real keys, they give us a different perspective. They give us a different approach. They give us a different attitude and posture towards fear and fear and stress. And so by mindfully focusing more on the trading tasks at hand rather than what our mind is telling us as reality, that's what mindfulness does for us, we're able to better manage the trade. And win, lose, or draw, as we do this, we begin to expand our repertoire and build new skills as we are able to reflect on our experience and how we manage the trade, rather than having just an escape and a release experience. We have a real trade experience that we can then reflect on and build new skills from. And that helps us and serves us well as we enter a new trade. So it's a different kind of thinking. And this kind of thinking, using mindfulness and committed choice. And by the way, committed choice, what I mean by that is committing to appropriate trading actions as the situation may demand it, rather than the, say, dysfunctional actions of escape and avoidance of the anxiety and the fear. Okay? So when we use mindfulness and committed choice, when we practice this well, we find that it's one of the very best ways to enter the zone or peak performance. Have you guys heard of the zone? How would you describe it? Let's just take a moment here and just tell me how you would describe being in the zone, because that's what we're kind of aiming for here over time and with a fair amount of practice and all of this stuff. Anybody? Effortless mastery. That's good, Scott. I like that one. Canceling out distractions. A real acute focus. Lack of fear. Not so sure that it's lack of fear, Jay, but we'll talk about that more. Focus with no distractions, right? And if you have a plan, trading within the plan and an ability to execute the plan. Yeah, when I think of, those are really good descriptions of the zone. When I talk to traders and athletes and others and have them describe the zone, here's what some of them say. Time tends to stand still. It's like I have enormous amounts of time to do what I have to do. I don't feel rushed. I don't feel pressured. Effortless effort. Somebody said effortless mastery, same sort of thing. It doesn't take much effort to really do what I need to do. There's an intense concentration. Working with tennis players, which I've done in the past, they see the ball clearly. That's what they report. They can see the ball better. Everything slows down. There's plenty of time. Also, I know what to do next. I'm not scrambling with my fears and my anxieties. Those may be occurring, and I may have those sensations, and I'll just notice them when I'm in the zone, and I let them go. And we'll talk more about how to do that today. Yep, and as Eric says, there's a nice little loop, a feedback loop, if you will, in real time that occurs when you're in the zone. It's positive reinforcement because you know you're executing perfectly, in fact. And so you just keep, the more you do that, the more you want to do that. And it just is this nice, good, positive feedback loop. So mindfulness and committed action helps the trader to maintain attention and poise without the need to really reduce or control our naturally occurring experiences. And those include experiences of stress and experiences sometimes of fear. And mindfulness and committed action allows us to develop the ability to kind of flow, be in the zone state with those naturally occurring experiences, and understand that they come and go as transitory, temporary aspects of the human experience, and not having to buy into them or ride them as if they were the only game in town. What about now controlling negative thoughts and feelings? What does that do to us when we're thinking about the zone? Like, let's say, for example, you're in the zone. You know, just imagine yourself immediately being put into the zone, magically being put into the zone, and you notice a little bit of fear, you notice a little bit of anxiety, and now you think, I need to control that. I need to reduce it or eliminate it. What do you think that's going to do to you and your ability to stay in the zone? Anybody? Eric says that the adrenaline ratchets it up. I don't think I can say that. The adrenaline increases to deal with it. That can certainly happen, and in fact, it certainly does happen. But If you are in the zone because you're able to focus on the tasks at hand in the moment, and all of a sudden you start focusing in on negative thoughts and feelings and try to deal with them, you take yourself right out of the zone and right into struggling with trying to control something that can't really be controlled and can't really be eliminated or lessened. And so you wind up, and in fact, as Eric says, you wind up having an adrenaline struggle, adrenaline increase and struggle, because you're trying to do something that you really can't achieve. So again, the question, we talked about this in the first session, but the question becomes, how successful have you been at controlling your negative thoughts and controlling your feelings? And is this really the thing that you want to do? And use your experience with this, not so much what your mind says, because your mind is always going to say, there's got to be some solution to this. The mind is more solution-oriented. We talked about this in the first session. It's great at planning, it's great at comparing and contrasting, and it's great at formulating solutions, but it's not so great at dealing with things like stress and anxiety and fear. So use your experience about this. All right. Yep, Tom says we've had absolutely no success in trying to control the fear in trading, and that's absolutely right. The more you try to do this, the more you're involved in the struggle with it, and the more you take yourself out of being in the zone of focusing on the things that are important to you, which in the midst of a trade is focusing on the bars, the volumes, the spreads, and what you need to do next. Okay? Now, you know, Tiger Woods, the great golf champion, enters the zone all the time. But you know, funny thing is, he's often quoted about feeling nervous in big events. And here's a kind of a cool quote from him. He says, quote, "The challenge is hitting good golf shots when you have to do it when the nerves are fluttering, the heart pounding, the palms sweating. That's the thrill," he says. Well, it may be a thrill for him because he's experienced at this, but what are we seeing here? That even Tiger Woods, maybe the greatest golf champ, well, I don't know if he's the greatest, but he's a great golf champion for sure. Even he gets the fluttering nerves and pounding heart and sweaty palms, right? So here's the question. Where's his focus? Is he focusing in on his fluttering nerves and pounding heart? Or is he focusing in on what he needs to do to hit the good golf shot? Right? It's something to think a little bit about here. This is kind of a theme that we're going to go to as we move along here. Here's another quote. "The physiological reaction to this was strong, and I had to force myself to use my training." Captain Sullenberger. Captain Sullenberger was the fellow, the pilot, the senior pilot on board the U.S. Airways flight that ditched in the Hudson River just outside of New York City a couple of weeks ago. And this was a quote I sent most all of you who were or all of you in the first session. I sent you a little video clip about this. I thought that was fascinating to see what he was talking about. And if you have video, you saw that he really was, you know, having quite a physiological reaction. But his focus was on, it was touching too, that's right, Eric. But his focus was on the tasks needed to land that plane. He wasn't thinking about praying. Katie Kirk, who was interviewing him, asked him, "Did you pray?" He said, "I figure somebody in the back there, and you know, the passengers were praying. I had to focus on my own stuff that I had to do." He wasn't focusing on the tension or the sweatiness or whatever, the nausea in his stomach or whatever was going on in that strong, you know, whatever the components were of the strong physiological reaction. His focus was on leveling the wings, figuring out what the right airspeed was going to be, and how to get there, getting the tail in first, lifting the nose up to do it. All of those things was what he was focused on, not on what his mind might have been saying to him at the time. We might not make it. Not on what his body was feeling at the moment, and not on the emotions. I'm sure he felt fear. I'm sure he was well trained to do this, and he said that he used to train others to do this. But remember, he also said that he never did this before. This was the very first time that he ditched the plane into a river. So he had to have had fear, okay? And yet he was able to act anyway. So courage, here's another quote from Ambrose Redman. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something else is more important than fear. And I like that quote because that's, in a nutshell, what we're going to be talking about today. And, you know, ask any combat veteran if this isn't true. I worked with a lot of folks who were combat vets when I used to work in the Veterans Affairs Hospital as a budding psychologist. I did my internship there, and I worked with a lot of combat veterans. And they all, to a one, there was never one that I met that didn't talk about the fear of combat. But they also talked about, I had to do what I had to do. I had a job to perform, even though I had intense fear, bullets and bombs and everything else going on all about me, and people getting blown up and killed and so on and so forth. I still had to do what I had to do, and they did. So saying that Tiger Woods and Captain Sullenberger and the veterans and all the rest of us really, you know, we all have fluttering nerves and strong physiological responses, yet they still perform at a high level anyway. Isn't this an interesting, isn't it interesting to realize this? Something we don't think about, but they all feel this stuff. So a focus on what our mind is telling us and the tension in our body and the emotions that we're feeling, that's what we call self-focus, versus focusing on the tasks we need to do to land that plane or to take that golf shot or to enter that trade by setting the stop, setting our exit location, observing the volume, observing the spreads, looking at where the closes are, all the things that we do in VSA as we trade. Self-focus leads to negative performance, and a task focus leads to positive performance. I mean, it's pretty basic, but really, how can this be any other way, right? It's when we try to find ways to think better, feel better, be more positive, avoid the negative feelings, control the negative feelings, use positive instead of negative self-talk, or control in any way what the mind is saying. All of that stuff just goes to hinder performance. And when I talk about performance, I mean it hinders our ability to trade well. Okay? And so let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we discovered for ourselves when we are self-focused on the fearful thoughts and the feelings. These are some of the examples, some of your examples on how a self-focus leads to negative performance. These are some of the responses to the questions about what we gave up for fear and what the cost and benefits are in trying to control fear that I asked you all to complete in the workbook that I sent out. So here's some of the costs. And this is your words, not mine at all. I missed a substantial profit. I missed taking perfect VSA setups because I was fearful or because I had anxiety. I canceled orders and missed good trades. And Tom says, yeah, cancel if close to becoming an entry, right? I've lost thousands in profits, one person said. Loss of income, another person phrased it. Here was a good one that we just spoke about. Another setback to sticking to my rules. Another setback in building my repertoire of trading behavior. Another setback in being able to learn how to trade and trade well. Amazing costs. Those are the short-term costs. The longer-term costs, sort of the same kind of themes. I'm always cutting my profits short. Again, I'm not learning how to hold on to a trade until it gives me a good profit. But there are other things too, not just about trading. Somebody said a lack of life balance. So caught up in the struggle with fear and anxiety that it's bleeding over into their other roles and relationships and other parts of their life. Who wants that, you know? Another person said, I lost trust in my system. I lost trust and confidence in myself. Other people said, my self-image was diminished. I feel like a failure. I feel like a failure. Oh, I could feel, excuse me, I can feel my heart just pull at that, you know? Who wants to feel like a failure? Because it's not necessary to do. No self-esteem, depression. Oh God, depression. I've worked with depressed people. Lots in clinical work that I've done. It's not a happy place to be. And failing to develop as a trader. Okay, so these are some of the costs. What did they get out of this? What were the benefits, I asked folks to kind of record and send out. Well, I got a temporary relief from stress. I didn't have to confront my fear. And I was able to stop the stress, at least until the next trade. So those were the benefits. Were there any more? Somebody said, absolutely none, with the exception of avoiding dealing with fear. And another person, actually several people said, no long-term benefits that I can note. No long-term benefits. A heck of a lot of short-term costs. No long-term benefits noted. So what does that tell us? It tells us trying to control our fear and anxiety does not work. If nothing else, if you come away with nothing else from this webinar, just at least come away with this. It doesn't work. We need something different. We need to start thinking differently to solve this problem. As Einstein said, we can't use the same kind of thinking that's created this highly damaging response to fear. We really need to get out of our heads. We need to get our heads out of our way. Excuse me. I misspoke there. We need to get our heads out of our way. You know, our goal here is to deal with the effects of cognitive activity, our thoughts and our feelings, to remove the effects, not the actual activity, not the actual thoughts, not the actual feelings, because we can't do that. But we can start to reduce the struggle with the fear and the anxiety, and that will reduce the effects of this activity on us. Control isn't the answer. So let's start to think about a different way here. What if all the effort we put into thinking and feeling a certain way was just doomed to fail? What if no one can consistently control his or her feelings? Tiger Woods can't. Captain Sullenberger couldn't. Why should you be able to? So what if it isn't even necessary to do so? What would you do then? What would you do then? What if it wasn't necessary to control our thoughts and our feelings? What, just if a few of you would just give a response to that, what would you do? What difference would that make in your trading? Jay says, simply acknowledge them. Yep. And Eric says you focus at the job at hand. And your trading is going to be better doing that. So the point here becomes the struggle to be without distress as the problem. It's not the solution. And if your mind is saying, oh, but I bet there's a better way, there's got to be a better way because I really can't, go with your experience on this, not what your mind might be telling you. Okay? The desire to feel better and just quickly fix that problem, it's what we call overlearned and pretty much automatic. I mean, we've done it so much throughout our lives that we really have learned it really well, and it becomes pretty much automatic. So, so our mind just naturally tries to fix this problem of fear in this way, but you know from your own experience that it doesn't work. It's not thinking and feeling good to trade well then. It's really developing the ability to perform optimally while feeling and thinking poorly. I always think about Serena Williams when I think about this. She's a star tennis player, female tennis player, great tennis player. But she will often get out on the court and she would just the first set just be dropping, games, spraying balls all over the court, hitting inconsistent serves. It's almost as if she's like coming up from the juniors and not the number 1 or number 2 or number 3 player in the world, whatever she is. And yet, she's clearly not feeling well, but does she let that get to her? 9 out of 10 times she doesn't. She finds within her game, she steps up her game, and she starts to play better and better and eventually wins the match. I've seen it over and over and over again. Roger Federer is the same way. It's the hallmark of a top player that they can feel bad, come into a match and not feel great, and notice that they're not feeling in the zone. Notice that they feel the stress and the fear and the crowd, coming at them, and yet playing well anyway because they can focus on the tasks at hand. Okay? And, there's one thing that I want to just say to you all, that the recognition that we don't have to control fearful thoughts and emotions should be liberating. It frees you from the belief that eliminating or controlling emotional states is possible. It really isn't. I mean, emotions, controlling emotions. Just here, look, show me joy right now. Just show me ecstatic joy. Show me unbelievable surprise and incredulity. Get surprised. Become incredulous. Can't do it, can you? Can't show me joy. Can't show me surprise. If we were all sitting together in a big auditorium and we had lots of people around us, I would say, fall in love. You think you can control emotions? Fall in love with the person sitting next to you. Now, that assumes, Eric and Debbie, that you guys aren't sitting together. All right? You can't control your emotions. You really just can't do it. It's a myth. So if you ever felt defective, or if you ever felt unskilled because you couldn't eliminate or control the problem of fear, you aren't. You're not defective. You're not unskilled. It's just not possible. It's possible to control, it's possible to reduce the effect that they have, but it's not possible to control them. You aren't defective. You're not unskilled. You're just stuck. You're not broken. Okay? Know that. That's important. All right. So what leads to solid trading performance? It's practice and trading, it's practice and training in trading skills, training yourself in skill-based behaviors, and it's practice and training in psychological skills, mindfulness being the key, okay? And mindfulness is a very different way of thinking. So let's do a little mindfulness activity right now. And this is in your workbook. And so you'll be able to use this in future days. So if you're willing, I'd like you just to start with both feet on the floor, arms comfortably at your sides. And when you're ready, if you're willing, just allow your eyes to gently close and bring your attention to your breath. You might notice your belly rising and falling with each inhale and each exhale. Or you might notice the classic location of the breath on the upper lip just below the nostrils. You might be able to feel the breath coming across the upper lip just below the nose. Though this is subtle and for some difficult to do. So instead, just notice your breath coming in cool through your nostrils and coming out a bit warmer. And try to determine the precise moment your breath starts to come into your body and the precise moment it begins to leave on the exhale. Stay with your breath for a few moments. There's no need to control your breath in any way. Just let it flow naturally, in and out, in and out. Now, if you're willing, I'd like you to imagine that you're sitting next to a small stream on a warm autumn day. As you gaze at the stream, you notice a number of large leaves of all colors, shapes, and sizes drifting along, each at its own pace, one by one in the slowly moving current. Allow yourself to simply be there for a moment, just watching. And when you're ready, gradually bring your awareness to what is going on inside you. Notice and label each experience that shows up. Thoughts, feelings, sensations, desires, impulses. Pay attention to what's happening in your mind and in your body, and then label it. Perhaps you're thinking, I'm bored. Well, notice that thought and label it. Thinking. As each thought and feeling and sensation comes into your awareness, notice them and then gently place them one by one on each leaf floating by. Take your time and observe as each leaf floats towards you, then watch it as it slowly moves away, drifting along as it carries the contents of your mind and body downstream and out of sight. And then return to the stream for the next leaf. And place another thought or feeling or memory or impulse on its own leaf and watch it as you let it float away. when you're ready, widen your attention to the room you're in, the sounds around you, and bring your attention to the body, your body within the room. And then open your eyes and come back present to the present moment. So that was mindfulness. That was a little exercise or experience in mindfulness. And mindfulness is just noticing what your mind is saying to you, accepting what's being said, and accepting what's being felt as naturally occurring events that are not necessary to judge as good or bad, and not necessary to control or alter. And we also talk a little bit about mindful attention, which is the ability to focus on the important task. And in the little leaf exercise that we just did, there were two tasks that you focused on. One was, first, the task of breathing and noticing your breath, either in your belly or on your upper lip or through your nostrils. And then the second task was placing your thoughts or your feelings or memories or impulses onto a leaf and letting them go. And practice is required for that, right? It takes some getting used to. I'm sorry, it takes some skill. So let's just get a quick sense of what your reactions were to that. Did you have difficulty staying on task? Those of you who did this? And did you have difficulty, preventing thoughts from drifting in, or did you feel bored, or was your mind telling you it wanted to do something else besides sit there and watch was it thinking about what you wanted to have for dinner tonight or what you were going to do? Didn't want to leave the stream, Eric says. Yeah, sure. That's part of it too. It's your mind saying, I'm very comfortable and I don't want to do what you're doing. Jay says, totally irrelevant thoughts kept sneaking in. I can do the past slide short. Yep, and that's the point, right? Anybody else want to give us? I see Gordon was about, yeah, good. Breathing okay, but got bored with the stream. There you go. Okay, and you felt the sense that, oh, I'm bored with this and I want to just go. Well, that's what you want to. Yeah, it is very relaxing, Eric, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But in Gordon, what you want to do is just notice the boredom and go back to the task at hand. Okay, this is practice for being able to notice stronger thoughts and stronger emotions like fear, and being able to refocus back on the tasks at hand, the trading tasks at hand, in the heat of the moment while you're making trades. And Eric says, as soon as I started to visualize the leaves, my breathing changed and I let go. Before that, I had trouble letting go when my exhale changed over to inhale. That's a good thing to know. And so that's something you want to stick with. First, Eric, is more visual things. Yes, I'll give you a copy of slides, Bill. I'll send them out. But Eric, that's what you want to do. You want to stick with more visual things at first until you get good at that, and then you can expand into more things like breathing. We always use breathing, I shouldn't say always. We often use breathing because the breath is always with you. You can do mindfulness in walking. You can do mindfulness in the car. You can do mindfulness in the shower. And we're going to talk a little bit about ways you can do mindfulness, specific ways. But the breath is always with you, and it's just the classic way to get into mindfulness and exercises like mindfulness. So it's important to note that you want to engage in this exercise while your mind is telling you something different, and not viewing the exercise as undoable because your mind is wandering off, okay? All these kinds of responses, like I got bored with the stream, or I had totally irrelevant thoughts, these are all normal. They're not problematic. Don't fight the thoughts. Just let them. Just let them. Let them be. And, you know, you're going to struggle with this a bit. And because our mind is so tuned, it's so overlearned, and it's so programmed and so automatic to want to solve the problem. And this is not solving the problem. This is acknowledging thoughts and sensations and letting them flow. So it's going to take some struggle. There's no question about it. And I work with traders individually, and you don't want to not struggle, because struggling is the first step in developing this self-awareness. When people do this, the very first thing people say is, gee, I can't control my mind. Exactly right. And you don't want to try to control it. Okay? Oops, went the wrong way there. Okay. So mindfulness is a process with which you can develop important new skills. These include things like personal awareness, diffusing from the things your mind is saying to you. Diffusing, not being fused with, not believing the mind as saying things are what it says it are, but diffusing. It's a new way of thinking. It's also a good way of placing attention where it's needed. So developing personal awareness of our mental and emotional states through mindfulness allows for these overlearned automatic behaviors that don't work. It allows them to be replaced by more what we would call functional behaviors and actions. So we can begin through mindfulness, through a good practice of mindfulness, to replace the focus on scary thoughts and feelings with a focus on sound trading behaviors and sound actions. Just like Tiger Woods, focusing on the golf shot in the midst of fluttering nerves and the pounding heart. Just like Captain Sullenberger, landing that plane despite strong physiological response. Okay, it takes some effort to get there. It's not, we can't do it, can't say, okay, go out tomorrow and do this, because you're not going to be able to do this. But with practice, you certainly can do this. With practice, you certainly can. Mindfulness also helps us by helping us develop an ability to notice the internal processes that we have from a distance, okay? From a distance, by taking those thoughts and feelings and placing them out at arm's length, placing them on the leaf and letting them go down the stream. That's taking those thoughts and getting some distance from them. It's decentering, defusing from them, okay? And it also helps us focus on the task, the trading task at hand. I always believe that self-awareness is the most crucial skill to develop, and mindful practice is the best way to do this, okay? Just some more important things about mindfulness. It promotes an immersion in the moment and the present awareness, in the now moment. This is the time where actions happen, not yesterday, not tomorrow, but now. Not the past, not the future, but now. And mindfulness brings us into the now. And that's when we can act in our best interests, when we're focused in the now. Fear takes us into the past. We remember a bad trade, or it takes us into the future. What's going to happen if I lose? Okay, mindfulness brings us back into the present and helps us to refocus on what's important to us. Okay, we can experience the distractors and the discomfort through mindfulness and still move ourselves in the direction of valued action in the moment. And I'll talk more about this later. It's also helpful to know what mindfulness is not. Somebody said, oh, I got really relaxed. It's not a form of relaxation, and it's not a form of positive thinking. It's not a trance-like state. Doesn't promote a blank mind or hypnosis or any of that stuff, okay? But it's, you know, it even took me a heck of a lot to accept this distinction at first, because mindfulness techniques do lead to a relaxed mental and physical state and do relieve the cognitive noise that's in our heads all the time. And your mind is going to try to latch on to that. And if it does, that's okay. Just notice it for what it is. Thank your mind for that. And just recognize that it's more of your mind saying something that isn't. Okay? All right. And as we experienced, we find things just pop into our heads, even important things that have to get done, but this is really the point of mindfulness. These thoughts are always with us, and there's no real need to make any effort to get them to go away. All right? Here's a good kind of rule of thumb to think about. There's a real difference between mindfulness and mindlessness. Okay? We can view mindlessness as an awareness that our minds and our bodies are in different places. How many times, for example, during the last hour has your mind wandered off? You know, you're sitting there at your computer, but maybe your mind is on the bad trade that happened from Friday, or what's for dinner tonight, or one of my favorite things is to think about a favorite street side cafe in Paris. You know, our mind creates all kinds of stuff for us, and it's always generating this stuff. And it's in a different place than where we are presently, where our bodies are. Our bodies are always in the present, but mindless mind is always in the future or always in the past. And we want to bring, mindfulness helps us bring our mind together with our body in the same place in the present moment. The present's where life is. And the present is especially where our trading life is. Okay, that's where we want to be. All right, I want to talk a little bit about fusion. We talked about this last session. But we said that fusion is when we believe what our mind is saying is truth or is a reality. And it's something that we feel compelled to respond to. So it's what our mind's saying. You know, if we're in a trade and the mind is saying I've got to get out because I'm afraid, then that's, and we see that as truth, that the market's going to go against us and we've got to get out. We start feeling compelled to respond to that. We get fused with those thoughts. And, you know, what our thoughts tell us do have meaning. It's not like they don't have meaning. We have a lifelong, ongoing learning process. You know, we all understand what an apple is just by the word or the thought of an apple. But it's when we're treating thoughts as though they are what our mind says they are. It's like treating the thought of an apple as if it is an apple and that we can actually bite into it and get nourished and taste that apple. We can't really do that with a thought, right? It's the same thing with fear. All right. You know, it's like this thought. It's the difference between if I have this kind of thought. If I stay in this trade, I will have a loser, okay? Versus the thought, I'm thinking that if I stay in this trade, I will have a loser. Compare these two. If I stay in this trade, I will have a loser versus I'm thinking, or another way to say it is, my mind is telling me that if I stay in this trade, I will have a loser. Very different. When we say that I'm thinking that if I stay in this trade, I will have a loser, or I am observing my mind saying that if I stay in this trade, I will have a loser, that thought is now kind of at arm's length from us. That thought can be placed on that leaf in the stream. It's not right smack in our face. The other way of, if I stay in this trade, I will have a loser, there's no distance there. We're fused. Okay? Do you see the difference between being decentered and being fused? Okay, more examples. I'm in a trade. I enter a long trade after having a test and a sign of strength in the background. I see a selling climax, and 3, 4, 5 bars later, I get a very nice test, and I get in the trade, and the trade starts to go in my favor for a couple of points or a few pips, whatever your trading vehicle is. And then I notice that the trade isn't moving. The price is staying at the same level. It looks like it's stalling out. And my thoughts go, it's not going to go. It's not going to make my profit objective. I better get out. I better get out. Versus those same thoughts that I'm having, but I'm saying, oh, my mind is telling me that this trade isn't going to go any further. My mind is telling me I'm not going to make my profit objective. What are the bars saying? How is the volume reading? There's no problem here. I can wait a little bit longer. I don't have to ride that thought. I don't have to, yeah, it's process. That's right. We're talking all about process here. We're talking all about process here. The fear, most of the time, has no rational basis unless we're confronted in, we talked about this before, in the fight-flight syndrome. If we're walking down the street and we step off the curb and a bus, we just nearly miss a bus because we jump back, that's our fear kicking in a positive way. There's a rational basis for it. But when day after day we're in the markets, day after day we're cutting trades short, day after day we're not making the entries, day after day we're doing erratic behavior, there is no rational basis for that, right? Okay. Okay, so that's and thoughts then begin to take the form of rules, and they affect our actions. If I stay in this trade, I'll have a loser. So what do we logically do if we're believing that, if we're fused to this notion that if I stay in this trade I will have a loser, logically we're going to get out. Or logically we're going to cut our losses or cut our winners short. Yeah, we're going to bail. Exactly. And that's our mind at work because the mind is so logical, right? But what we're doing is we're avoiding the loss rather than making money, or rather than following the trade to its conclusions. And the more we use avoidance based on our fused view of what our mind is telling us about the market, the more we're trapped in that vicious cycle. And the more we narrow or limit our behavioral repertoire, our trading skills get narrowed. Okay? So Eric says, so upon the stall of the bar in the example that I gave, we go instead to our exit process rules. Well, there's a step between that, Eric. On the stall of the bar, our mind kicks in and starts telling us stuff. We believe that stuff that the mind is telling us, and then we logically go to our exit process rules. Okay? So there's a step in between. And mindfulness helps us not get so tied into those thoughts and to expand that step in between and keep focused on the bars rather than and on the trade rather than on what our mind is telling us. So we can't diffuse until we, that is, in other words, we can't see what the mind is saying as just temporary thoughts and what the body is feeling as just temporary emotions until we have the ability to decenter from what the mind is telling us, at least enough to recognize that it's occurring, okay? That's the first step. What the mind says and how we respond is extremely quick and extremely automatic. In fact, we call them automatic thoughts. We see our experience as something in our environment. We see or experience something in the environment. Our mind kicks in immediately, and the mind is just this word-generating machine that never stops, and we believe it and we fuse into it. Mindfulness helps us defuse from that. And it's promoting a greater awareness of what the mind is telling us, and with practice, as it occurs, we're in a better position then to make choices given what's important to us. Now, I want to just emphasize briefly, regular practice is really necessary. We can't just do this on an intellectual level. It's part of the reason why I sometimes talk in terms of metaphors and analogies, so that you can have this little aha, I got it moment and really pick it up. It's also why I actually am using mindfulness experiences in this webinar. Even though it's over the web, you still can experience it. Practice really is necessary. Doing it on an intellectual level is nice, and you pick up some information, but to be able to use it, you need to struggle through it a little bit, and you need to develop the skills of mindfulness so that you can apply them in the heat of the moment in your trading. It takes effort to do. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go on here. So let's just take a little bit. Here's a little graphic or a little model about how mindfulness and diffusion work, so that you get a good sense of this. Okay. With the regular practice of mindfulness, we develop self-awareness. And that begins to break down the automatic process of immediately responding to what our mind is saying. Okay? As we get a little bit more time from automatically responding to what our mind is saying, it gives us an opportunity to set our thoughts out a little bit, set them out at arm's length, for example, and examine them a little bit, and because they're not so automatic, and now we can look at them and we can decenter from them or defuse from them, and defuse from what the mind is telling us. Okay? When we can do that, then we can refocus our attention onto the demands of the trading situation as it might be needed. We can exit a trade if the market's going against us with a high volume bar, right, and some wide spread. We get out of a trade then. But if not, then we manage the trade. And do that enough over and over, and it results in more confident and more personally successful trading. And it also begins to expand your trading skills repertoire. You become a better trader, not a better escape artist. Okay? How are we on time now? Shall we take a little bit of a break, about 10 minutes? Does that sound good to everybody? Ah, good. Eric, you got it. Yeah, I thought that's why I didn't want to answer that. I thought this might be helpful to you here, this little graphic, this little model. All right, let's take a 10-minute break and come back. Right now, my computer clock says 4:16, so let's come back at 4:25, actually 9 minutes, so that we started a little bit late, and I don't want to keep us too much over. Okay, so I'll see you at 4:25. That's Eastern Standard Time. Whatever time you are in, it would be 25 after the hour. Okay? Good. Richard, I don't know if you can hear me or not. I don't know if you stopped recording. If you did, and you need another countdown, just let me know. Okay, we're back here at my time is 4:26. Excuse me, 4:26 Eastern Standard Time, and so I'm guessing that everybody's here. Just give me a Y if you're back and ready to go, and we'll get going with the second half of the second part of this presentation. Okay, good. Terrific. If you're not here, please respond. Yes, there you go. There you go, Tom. You're got a nice sense of humor. That's very helpful in trading, I think. All right. So we talked about mindfulness and diffusion, and I think it's pretty clear about how diffusion works, right? And again, I need to emphasize the regular practice of mindfulness, and I'm going to show you a couple of ways to practice this. I've given you, in the first workbook, I gave you one method for mindful practice, and in this workbook, I've given you two. So that's three ways of just doing mindfulness on its own. In other words, setting aside, and it doesn't need to be long, by the way. 10 minutes is fine. If you want to go longer than that, that's okay, but 10 minutes will give you tremendous benefit if you do it regularly. It's like, you know, I said before, you can hear it on an intellectual level. Unless you experience it, it's the, you know, you're not going to get it. It's not going to be meaningful for you, and you're going to not benefit from any of this. I shouldn't say it quite that way, but you won't benefit from this in the way that it's intended. Think about going to the gym. You know, if you wanted to become fit, you would go into the gym and you would, you know, work out with weights or running or spin machines or whatever it is, okay? I'll get to the work. I'll talk about the workbook in a second. Renee, let me just finish this. So if you want to go to the gym and you want to get fit, you don't just go to the gym and stand there and say, okay, I'm fit now, right? I've done my work. You've got to use the machines. You've got to do the exercises. You've got to put the effort in. It's the same thing with regular practice of mindfulness. Really should do it every day, and I'm going to show you some different ways of doing it besides just setting aside time. But setting aside time, quiet time where you're not going to be disturbed for about 10 minutes is a wonderful thing to do. I know lots and lots of professional traders, lots and lots of good traders who do that every day. One fellow I know over in Santa Monica gets up at 5:30, and the very first thing he does when he gets out of bed is go and do his mindfulness practice. Walking can count as mindfulness, Gordon, absolutely. There are many methods of walking mindfulness. I can't quite show you how to do walking mindfulness over the internet. Maybe if we get into a live seminar at some point in the future, maybe another San Francisco summit or some other venue, I can show you how to do walking mindfulness. It's quite a cool thing to do. Tom, thank you. Renee, you're right. I did mail a copy of the workbook. If you didn't get one, you need to send me your email address, Renee. I don't think you did that last time, now that I think about it. And my email, I'll show you my email at the end of this, and I'll put it in now as well. It's drgary@peakpsychology.com. Just send me your email address and I'll get out this and last session's workbook. All right, let's move on then. You know, lots of times all the information is coming in at us at once and it's easy to feel overwhelmed. You really got no distance from your thoughts. It's all like right there in your face, or it's all right there in your head. And the more that it's kind of jumbled in and right in your face, the more we're going to be fused to those thoughts and feelings. So here's an example. This is somebody who is about to take a trade, and they're replaying thoughts of painful memories of the last loss, and saying to themselves, or their mind is saying to themselves, I can't have another loss, I can't have another loss, and they can't shake this off, and they want this feeling and they want these thoughts to stop. And at the same time, they're feeling extremely anxious, they're feeling extremely tense, keyed up, they said, gripping fear, sick to their stomach, all of those strong physiological responses that we talked about not only in the preview to this, but in the first session when we talked about the sort of global response that we have with fear, and the flight-fight syndrome that kicks in, or the fight-flight response that kicks in, which is a genetic response. It's an automatic kind of a response. And then they are hesitating on pulling the trigger, and they move their stops wider to avoid a loss, and they hold their losers beyond the proper risk level. Okay, so this is really an overwhelmed view. Okay, here's a way to have a little bit more useful view, and this is you as an observing self, and we're going to do an exercise right towards the end. We're going to do something called the I view. You might want to make a note of that here, and in that this is I'll show you exactly what I mean by the observing self. But you can separate your thoughts and your feelings and your actions out a little bit, and I give you a blank form in the workbook to do this, and I would encourage you to do this when you have a stressful situation occur. Use this form to jot down and separate out your thoughts and your feelings. And these are the same things that we saw on the earlier slide. I'll just go back to that here, but they're all jumbled together. And you can just focus on your thoughts, focus just on your feelings, and focus on the actions that you want to take on this. Okay? So it's a more useful view for you. And I'll show you a little bit more how to use that, how to use this in a moment. Gordon asked me if I'm going to be in London. Yes, I'll be at the London events, and I'll also be at the Chicago events. These are the boot camp events in trading stocks, in trading the S&P E-mini and other indices, and in trading Forex. Those are 3 different sessions that are occurring in London, all 3 of them, and 3 different sessions that are occurring in Chicago, all 3 of them. And I will be at all of those events, as will Gavin and Brad Bedford Brown, a fabulous trader from Australia, fabulous Forex trader, and the one and only Sebastian Manby, will also be there. And maybe, Richard, if you hear this, you could provide a link to folks here for the registration page for those events. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm sure it's on the Trade Guider website, but just as a little advertisement if you're interested. All right. So let's talk a little bit about how to use mindfulness and when to use it. We talked about doing it as a separate activity, okay? That's certainly one way to do it, and I encourage that. Strongly encourage you to do that. It's a great way to practice it and develop your skills. But you can also use mindfulness in these activities as well. When you're studying charts at night, when you're recording trades, when you're prepping for tomorrow, looking at where your support and resistance areas are, looking at how trend channels have been setting up, looking at higher time frames, the VSA indications that might be occurring there, right? Looking at related markets. All of those things that we do when we prep for the next day can be done mindfully. What do I mean by that? I don't mean much different than some of the exercises that we've been doing. And now I'm going to start to move more into a practical aspect or a practical use of mindfulness. But just notice where your mind starts to wander when you're doing these activities. If you're studying the charts and your mind starts to wander, oh, I wonder what's going on over at Trader's Laboratory. And you find yourself start surfing the net and clicking on the Trader's Lab site or whatever you might do. Just bring your mind back to the task at hand, right? When you start to notice your mind talking to yourself and your mind wandering, just notice then whether you're doing something valued or whether you're becoming distracted. That's mindfulness, okay? You can do it when you're selecting out potential stock candidates, or if you're looking in the Forex markets, the different currency candidates that might come up for trading. If you're reviewing a VSA club video, if you're annotating charts with the VSA indications, whatever you're doing, if you find your mind wandering 5 minutes from now when you're listening to this presentation, gently notice it, gently bring it back to the task at hand. Now, and at the bottom here I say, note what you're saying to yourself, the images that you have, the feelings, the sensations, and then return to your task. The more you do this, the better you're going to be at this. There's another one that I include in the current workbook. It's a structured mindfulness task, and it's called washing a dish. Debbie, you'll probably like this one a lot, or the women might like this for spouses. I'm being, I guess, a little gender inappropriate here, but the idea is not to wash the dishes for the night, but to take a dish or two and mindfully wash it. And there's instructions in there on how to do that. That would be a task that we normally would see our minds wander all over the place and focus on everything but washing the dish. So this is a washing the dishes comes out of a Buddhist tradition. It's got a long history, and it's used in a lot of the traditional practices for mindfulness and meditation. So this is a streamlined version for you that makes it a little more practical and useful for you. But here's a suggestion for you. Here's a nice mindful challenge. Over the course of the next few weeks, do a mindfulness practice every day. Alternate with the leaves on the stream mindfulness activity with washing a dish every other night. And do that for a few weeks. And do mindfulness while you're studying the charts and recording trades and prepping for the next day and reviewing VSA club video and all of that. And then start to notice. Notice if after practicing this for a couple of weeks, notice if your concentration doesn't improve. Notice if when you're studying your charts and you're annotating your charts, notice if you don't see more things that you didn't see before. Notice if you don't see things more clearly. Notice if time starts to go, kind of stand still for you while you're doing these activities. Notice if you don't see yourself starting to slip into the zone. Okay? Whoops. Oh, I got out of, that slide got out of a section there. Okay, sorry about that. All right. So to bring us back here, we're talking about mindful exercises or mindful activities that you can do. And you know, all training programs have exercises and activities. Consider this your training program in mindfulness. Consider this your training program in how to begin to reduce the struggle with stress and to build more confidence in your trading. Okay? You need to do these exercises. And there's no other way around it. I can't, even from over the wonders and the miracle of the internet, I can't wave a magic wand and make you stress and fear-free, anxiety-free. You have to do that on yourself, on your own. Okay, so you can also start, and I would encourage you to start using mindfulness in more stressful situations. There's a form in your workbook, and here's an example of it. The form just across the top here, it's called the Stressful Situations form. It has spaces for you to fill in the date and time, the situation that occurred that caused you to have thoughts and feelings and sensations of fear, anxiety, and stress. Something called a SUDS rating, and I'll talk about what that means in a moment. And what strategies you might have used when you had these thoughts and feelings or when you encountered this situation and what the effect was. All right? So we'll go through this. Here the date and time are fairly obvious. The situation was that this trader took a short trade after an upthrust followed by a no demand, but they were in a short trade. They gave a SUDS rating here of 7, and I'll explain that in a moment. And they had these thoughts and feelings and sensations. This is what they observed. They wrote this down. They used that form of separating their thoughts and their feelings from one another, and they were able to record it in this form. I was scared. I knew this market is going to get me. That's what they were saying to themselves. I know this market is going to get me. And they felt tension in their back, and they had a dry mouth, cotton mouth, which we know is a normal experience from the fight-flight response. Okay? We talked about that last session. And they used these strategies, eye view and observing the self. We're going to talk in some depth about that in a few moments, okay? Also surfing, another thing I'll talk about in some depth in a few moments. And at the end, I said out loud, how crazy I thought that the market was going to get me, okay? So this is a form that you can use, again, to help you become more mindful when you confront a stressful situation. It doesn't mean that you handle the situation, the stressful situation, perfectly. It doesn't mean that you handle it, extraordinarily well. That's not the point. The point is to start to begin to observe your thoughts and your feelings and your sensations in a mindful manner. Okay? That's the idea behind this. Okay, what's this SUDS rating thing all about anyway? What does that mean? This is something we use. We call it subjective units of distress. Oh, that's such a psychological term, isn't it? It's so psychological, I couldn't resist putting it in here. But it's something that we use in psychology, and there's a lot of different forms of it. If you went out on Google and you looked up subjective units of distress, you would find probably 5 or 6 or 7 different things listed out there. But basically what it is it's a rating scale on a scale of 1 to 10 in this instance, where you can rate the level of your distress, right? Now this is also in the workbook, so you don't need to worry about getting this. But you can rate it from actually 0 to 10 in this instance. So 0 would be you feel absolutely no distress. You're at peace, you're serene, you're calm and relaxed. No negative thoughts, no negative feelings of any kind, and sort of it's like taking a nice warm bath, or think more like whirlpool or jacuzzi type of bath, having a massage, lying on the beach with nothing to do, no cares or concerns in the world, or watching a funny movie. You're under no stress at those instances, right? In those instances. Okay, mild stress. You could rate that anywhere from 1 to 4. It's a mild level of worry or anxiety, but you can readily cope with the situation. You might feel like you're a little more alert or just slightly nervous. At the lower end of the scale, you might have to make a special effort to notice the unpleasant feeling. At the higher end, you might notice those unpleasant thoughts. And some examples are athletes before a competition, and even confident speakers before a presentation. Something that I always feel, this mild level of anxiety before making a presentation. Used to be much higher than that. I used to have to do all kinds of things to try to control the anxiety before I spoke in public, all to no avail, mind you, but I did them anyway until I finally learned it didn't make any sense to do that. But even the mild level of anxiety, even when I started to, before I did this session and the first session, and even the preview, and even when I get up to speak in front of folks in San Francisco and what have you, I still feel that every single time. I just notice it and I go on with the task at hand. Okay, moderate level of distress would be 5 or 6. This would be noticeably uncomfortable feelings and unpleasant thoughts. You might become distracted by them, and you might be thinking that it's kind of difficult to cope with these, and that something might need to be done about them. But you're still able to attend more or less to what's happening in your immediate environment. 7 or 8 would be a high level of distress. Really uncomfortable thoughts and feelings are dominating your focus now. Your body sensations are coming into play. You might have a racing heart, muscle tension, queasy stomach, or tingling hands or feet, and they become prominent in your awareness. It's really difficult to concentrate because you're focused on the stress and the fear, and not surprisingly, you're looking to escape the discomfort. So that would be a rating, that would be a high level, and that would be a rating of 7 or 8. And then 9 or 10 would be the extreme. You'd be out of control, you can't cope, and you're just overwhelmed. You'd actually be withdrawing. I don't know that anybody would reach that level, but we probably would hit 7 or 8 and 5 and 6 from some of the responses that I saw in the exercises from last week that people sent in. So why rate this stuff anyway? Why even bother to do this? Well, there's a couple of reasons. 2 good ones that I think are worth noting. And the first is that you're going to quickly notice that not every situation has the same level of distress. Not every situation has the same level of fear or anxiety. But yet we tend to act like it does. Okay? So this is a way to begin to discriminate from higher levels of distress and lower levels of distress. And the more you can finally discriminate those, the better able you're going to be to handle this. You're going to say, oh, this feels like, this is like a 5, maybe a 6. You know, you could even say a 5.5 if you wanted to get, fine about it. And you say to yourself, gee, I had a 7.5 last week. I can handle this. Okay, you get the idea here? By starting to discriminate between different levels of stress, you begin to notice how notice those different levels, and you're not responding to each and every stressful event as if it were a 9 or a 10. Okay? That's one reason. The other good reason, I think, for doing this is that as you practice mindfulness, you will see your distress levels go down. You'll still confront stressful situations. You still will have stress, but your subjective units of distress, your SUDS rating, are going to change. And this is a really good way to measure that change. All right? So 2 good reasons. Discriminating against different levels of stress and getting a really good handle on that, and measuring your progress as you practice mindfulness activities and you learn to discriminate between more stressful and less stressful situations. Okay? Oh, before we leave that, is there any questions on that? Are we all pretty clear on this? You could give me a yes or a question. Okay, people are saying yes. I don't see any questions here. Okay, so we'll start to move on. Now, I want to move into the area of valued choices and valued trading actions or valued trading behavior. These are things that bring us closer to our goals. Okay? Versus emotion-driven choices, which don't. Okay? Now, there's lots of good research that shows that performers across all different fields, whether it's trading, athletics, being a surgeon, being a chess master, whatever the field is, a lawyer, doesn't really matter. All those performers, if they focus on values and valued actions, they're more likely to train harder and train more consistently and get better, build better skills in their chosen field, whether it be trading or surgery. They will get better at it. They make better choices, especially when they're facing hardships or negative thoughts and feelings. Okay? When they're focused on valued choices, they make better choices. When they're also more perseverant in day-to-day activities that ultimately lead to the goal of achievement. And we'll talk a little bit about this in a minute. But there's nothing really new here. I think we all know this stuff, right? That if we're focusing on the values of our craft and we're focusing on valued actions, we're going to get more skilled, we're going to train more and get more skilled, we're going to make better choices, and we're going to persevere. Makes sense, okay? And through this, high-level performers all develop what we call mental toughness. And the way we define it is an ability to act in a purposeful way, systematically and consistently, in the pursuit of values and valued actions, meaning good trading behaviors, right? even and especially when faced with strong emotions that we as human beings just naturally want to try to control or eliminate. But they don't try to do that. They continue to act purposefully. Think in terms back to Captain Sullenberger and Tiger Woods. You know, they still have those strong emotions, but they still act in a purposeful way. So let's take a look at, whoops. I'm sorry, I'm a little out of sync here with my slides. So it's the difference between actions that are emotion directed versus actions that are value directed. We know that when we're focused on fear and anxiety, our actions are likely to be avoidance and escape. When we're fused with those thoughts, when we're fused with those feelings, we want to try to escape. When we're not fused, when we're defused from those thoughts and when we're defused from those sensations, we're still going to have them. But over time with mindfulness, the impact of them are going to be so much less that we are able to focus more on valued directions and valued actions. So the real question then becomes, what's the real problem? Is it the emotion of fear or what we do when we feel fear? And this has been a theme that we've been going through over and over again here. It's what we do when we feel the fear. The issue isn't having or not having the emotion or even how strong those emotions are, but just accepting the presence of those emotions as a normal part of being human and staying focused on what really matters. Okay, so let's take a look here about let's take a look at some of the examples of value-directed trading actions that are your examples. Again, thank you for the folks who sent these in. These are very helpful. But let's just take a look at some of these. And if anybody wants to add to this list as we go along, let me know, or just type it in. Some of the things that people said that are valuable trading behaviors that lead to solid trading performance. Following a daily trading routine, right? Creating and following a plan. Some folks may not have a plan, but that's really important to have. If we aren't well planned, it's really tough to be in these markets. And then following that plan. Keeping the evolving phase and the pattern of the market in mind, not just the immediate bars. This is something that I see a lot of traders, a lot of novice traders do. They're focused on the immediate bars. They see a no demand, and it's in the middle of nowhere. There's no sign of weakness in the background. There's been no buying climax or stopping volume to the upside, or there's been no upthrust that's occurred. Just a no demand, and they don't understand why it is that when they take that trade, they get nailed every single time that they do that. And then as they get nailed, they get fearful, and as they get fearful, they learn how to fear the market. We talked about that, okay? So this is a really good, valuable trading behavior that we should be doing, is keeping the background in mind, keeping the evolving phase in mind, not just the immediate bars. One trader said, I have 8 personal rules, and I need to follow them. He's already defined those personal rules, most likely from his trading plan, and he knows that these are valuable for him or her, and she or he wants to follow those because they know that doing so will lead to good trading outcomes. Okay? Holding the trade to the profit objective, isn't that a great, valuable trading behavior? Okay? We talked about cutting winners short, and it's a common problem when we are focused on our fears. Always setting a hard stop and not moving it away from the price action just to give it a little bit more room and eventually get nailed on that. Another solid trading behavior. Use a written checklist to verify the trade. Another good one, right? It's a helpful thing to do if you're, especially if you're just learning how to work with a specific trade, or if you're having troubles and that would be a helpful, I want to say crutch, not in a negative way, but in the way that we use a crutch to walk around and get around and be mobile when we have a broken leg. Using it in that respect, a good crutch for us, particularly when we're faced with stressful situations and fearful and anxious situations. Trade only true VSA setups. That's a good one. I like that. Not taking any pretty trade that comes along, but things that are actually well-proven, solid VSA trade setups. Another valuable trading behavior. Trade only setups that are part of my plan. Okay, having a plan, following the plan, trading only those setups. Record all my trades. I have a sense that if we polled everybody in here, and I would be one that would affirm to this, that I don't record the losing trades, right? I don't record the trades that I was fearful about and get out of, but recording and then reviewing all of our trades is something that just leads to good trading and profitable trading. Practice trading for 2 hours a week, at least 3 times a week. Oh, I like this. This person's a behaviorist like me. I love this. Practice trading. Practice trading is really important. I could go on for a whole session on this. But this is how you get good, is using bar replay or getting the charts out, printing out charts and covering them up and just doing one bar at a time and practice that trading. Even though you're not putting any money on the line, and even though people say, oh, it's not quite the same, it's not quite the same, but it will give you excellent chart reading skills. And I say I like this, and it's behaviorally defined because it's very specific. He's going to, or she's going to practice trade for 2 hours at least 3 times a week. Very specific. I like that. They can measure their progress that way, okay, and see how well they do. Not in terms necessarily of how many trades did they win or lose on, but how did they do with their practice of practice trading, given that they said for 2 hours a week, 3 times a week. Did they do it for 2 hours, 3 times a week, or did they not? Again, review my trades and learn from the losers. That's really good. And I would also encourage you to learn from the winners. Look at the losers, understand what went wrong, understand what went wrong, and then set them aside. You don't need to necessarily dwell on them. Look at the winners too, and focus on those and really kind of burn those into your memory so you got those in the future. And prepare for my trading the night before. That's really important to do. Think in these 3 terms: preparation, execution, and review. I mean, that's really, as a trading psychologist, when I work with individual traders, that's what I do. I help them prep for their trading, and there's a whole list of things that are involved in that. I help them execute, and you can imagine that what I'm talking about today, mindfulness and dealing with fear and all of that, is part of execution. And reviewing trades and recording and measuring progress. That's part and parcel of developing yourself as a good trader. So these are value-directed trading actions. These are excellent. These are really excellent. Let's just take a quick look here. Print out and learn, set up on charts, and make notes on charts. Ernest says that. Absolutely. Annotate your charts. It's one of the very best things that you can do to learn VSA and learn how the markets move. Tom says, don't get mesmerized watching numbers move up and down on the trading DOM and continue to watch the charts. I consistently enter short trades just as high volume down bars occur. And that's good. So you have that at least in your mind, and if it's not firmly in your mind, put it to paper and specify that. And then when that comes up, you see yourself watching the dome too much, mindfully watch the dome, glance at it from time to time, but if you're too keyed into it, notice that and say, more valued behavior is to watch the charts and look for high volume bars, okay? Yeah, Gary Player. Gordon says that Gary Player has a great quote, "The more I practice, the luckier I seem to get." It is a great quote, and I'll give you another one if I can remember it correctly. One of my mentors, Charlie Marr, said, luck is the confluence of preparation and opportunity. Luck is where preparation and opportunity meet. That's what he used to say. Luck is where preparation and opportunity meet. The more prepared, the more practiced you are, when the opportunity arises, you can take it, right? Others would say, oh, how lucky that person is. But no. As Gary Player knew, the more preparation he made, the more practice he had and put in, the luckier he seemed to get. That's a very good quote. Excellent. All right. Any other trading behaviors that we might want to add to this list before we get off of it? And since I see no one typing, I'll move on. So, value-driven choices. They always require some discomfort. Now here's where the truth comes out, okay? Value-driven behavior, all of these things in this list and others that you might have, all of these rules, to do them and do them consistently requires some discomfort, okay? I'm not going to kid you about that. Let's get outside of trading for a moment and let's just look at an example. Let's say we want to get buff. We want to achieve some level of physical fitness, whatever that is. So what are the steps necessary to do that? Let's say we want to, change our body mass index by 3 or 4 points and add more muscle mass and reduce body fat. Okay? So what are the steps? Well, one step is deciding that we want to achieve physical fitness and the reasons why we want to do that. Is it because we want it for health? Is it because we want it for well-being? Is it because we want to be more attractive? I mean, you get the idea, but there has to be a rationale for it, right? Another step is developing and deciding to follow a specific plan, whether it's running, weights, swimming, tennis, diet, all of that stuff factors in some way, shape, or form, and all of it, or some of it, would be part of a plan for this, right? And then aren't there daily choices that have to be made in order to follow that plan? And isn't there a willingness to experience some level of discomfort and yet persevere with our plan? We might be tired. We might be hungry. There might be some more attractive event or thing we might want to do rather than go work out. But we've got to make that choice, and hopefully we make that mindfully, right? And the reality is that many choices need to be made across many days and many weeks and many months for those benefits to be realized, right? That's kind of discomforting if you think about it. You have to keep doing that over and over and over again. You got to keep making those same choices to follow that same plan, and you got to be willing to, in a way, sacrifice some of the comfort that you might feel when you're tired and say, I don't really want to do that. I'd rather be comfortable and just sit and be a couch potato and watch, you know, South Park or whatever is on TV. Or you might be hungry and you trying not to eat fattening foods, and you see a piece of cake and you say, I'd rather satisfy my desire to be sated rather than deal with the discomfort of this because I'm trying to lose weight and lose body fat on my BMI, right? How different is this from trading? Not really. Not really. We have to also experience some discomfort if we want to put these value-driven behaviors and actions into place. Yeah, where's the magic pill when we need it? There is no magic pill, I'm sorry to say. And in all of this, just keep in mind, and it's a theme that I've been repeating throughout here, but emotions are not the enemy of trading. You know, just remind yourself of this. Emotions exist, and they're always going to exist. It's the things that we do to eliminate or control emotions that are counterproductive. You demonstrated that there's no consistent success or benefit in eliminating fear by the remarks and comments that you made. And we know clearly that the patterns of avoidant behavior interfere with trading. So the key is to notice them. Notice the emotions and notice the thoughts and letting go as best you can and staying focused on the demands of the trade and maintaining commitment to what matters in the long run rather than choosing to reduce a temporary feeling. You have to do what matters, even if sometimes it doesn't feel so good. You do what matters in the service of what's meaningful to you, okay? And we're talking now about acceptance and willingness. They're related to achieving personal goals. When I talk about acceptance, I'm talking about acceptance of some of these discomfortable or uncomfortable feelings and thoughts. We know that avoidance is connected to the short-term control or relief of personal discomfort. Acceptance, the opposite of that, and a willingness to experience the discomfort in the service of reaching our personal goals is what we're talking about. And it is so there's really two foundations to helping yourselves minimize the struggle with fear and develop more confidence in your trading. And one is full attention to the moment, not living in the future and not living in the past, but being present in the now. And we use mindfulness to do that, to be present, and to develop the self-awareness we need to develop so that we can decenter and diffuse from what our mind is telling us. Okay? And then in addition to that is what we call poise, or what we might call mental toughness. It's clarifying valued behavior and actions in our trading, understanding we just can't control those feelings and your mind's fear-based thoughts and images, just can't do it, and accepting these as temporary thoughts and as temporary emotions while being committed to pursuing the actions and choices of value. Okay? All right. Now, it's not always the easiest thing to do, and I understand, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you can surf some of this stuff and how you can handle some of the more distressful times a little bit better. But before we do that, what I want to do is I'm going to switch over here to the whiteboard, and I want to talk to you about a mindful perspective or point of view. And I'm going to draw this, and you'll have a copy of this in your workbook. It's called the I view, and it's a particular point of view, but the best way for me to describe it is just to draw it. And now I don't know if I can do this or not. Can everybody, first of all, can everybody see this whiteboard and this fairly large circle that I'm putting on the whiteboard. Just, okay, good. Good. So I've drawn a big circle, and because I'm presenting here, I'm going to call it the world. Okay? And into the world, a body is born. And it takes the very first breath that it ever took. And that body, taking its very first breath that it ever took, is you. Okay? In your mind's eye, just imagine for a moment taking the very first breath that you ever took. And at the same time, you open your eyes and you begin to see light and objects out in your environment. And you notice that your skin, you start to feel the air around your skin, and as you touch things with your hands or your toes, you feel those objects. And you begin to smell different smells and taste different tastes. All five of your senses, all five of your senses begin to take in information and bring the world into your awareness. Now, this point of view of the you taking in pure information and looking at things just as they are, right? This you that took its very first breath, taking in all this information through your five senses, is just taking in information as it is. No judgments are made. It's just as it is. It's just information as it is. So as you're taking in all this information, at some point, your mind shows up. Now, we know the mind from the words that it creates, right? It's, if we quiet down, you'll notice your mind starts creating words. Your mind really is a word-generating machine. It just fills in the blanks. That's what it does. Okay? Now we're going to use two sets of words here. We're going to use two sets of words. Oh, that didn't come out, but that's valued actions. Suffering and struggle and valued actions. Now, from this you, from the perspective of this you that took its first breath, from this point of view, you can notice things. You can notice things in the world. You can notice your body's reaction to things in the world. You, the you that took its first breath, from this perspective, you can notice what's going on in your mind, what your mind is telling you. That you that took its first breath, is always there to notice. We often call this the observing you. You can observe your mind at work. You can notice and observe your body and sensations and feelings. And your five senses notice what's going on in the world about you. Now, from this perspective as well, this mindful, observing you, the you that took its first breath, can also notice things about your body and your mind and the world in a non-judgmental way. It becomes much more easy to do from this perspective, from this you that took its first breath point of view. You don't throw judgments out about good or bad, right or wrong from this you. Remember, this you that took its first breath, took in the world through its five senses just as that information was. No judgments, just as it was. You can still do this from this observer point of view. And so this you can notice your whole body moving through the world. You can notice yourself moving through the world. And you can notice whether your mind and your body and your whole you can notice whether it's moving towards suffering and struggling with fear and anxiety, or you can notice whether it's moving towards valued actions. When you take this observing you, this you that took its first breath, when you take this perspective, you can notice which way your body is moving, towards struggle or towards valued action. And because you can notice it, you can begin to make better choices about whether you want to move towards suffering and struggling, or whether you want to move towards valued action. Now you can use this I view and the observing you to notice, is what I'm doing right now of value to me, or is what I'm doing right now in the present moment a struggle with fear and with stress? Okay? Is what I am doing right now in the present moment of value to me, or is what I'm doing right now in the present moment a struggle with fear and stress? This is the view of mindfulness. And this is what we call the I view. And here it is in a little bit clearer form. Okay? And here's the question that always goes with it. Given what's important to me, am I willing to do and am I willing to experience, given what's important to me, what am I willing to do and what am I willing to experience to move in the direction of valued actions in the present moment? Okay? Am I, as in my observing you perspective, in my I view perspective, and we say I view because we always talk to ourselves in terms of I, and it started out as I view, but as I'm explaining it to you, I have to use the term you. That's just something that my mind forces me to do, I guess, right? So you can use this view, this perspective, to see if you're moving more towards struggling with suffering, struggling with fear and suffering with anxiety, or are you moving more towards valued action? Okay? Now I'd like to do a little bit more on this you that took your very first breath. I want you to be more clear about this because this is important. So I'm going to ask you to gently close your eyes for a moment and turn your attention to your breath. And follow your breath in and out, and in and out. And now from your breath, just gently turn your attention to the sensation of your back against the chair that you're sitting in. Feel how your back is touching the back of the chair. And notice, too, the feeling of pressure where your legs meet the seat of your chair. And then notice the feeling of pressure. Maybe it's firm pressure, maybe it's light pressure, but notice the pressure points where your feet meet the floor. Now, see if you can imagine yourself in your mind's eye at the other side of the room, watching yourself sitting in the chair. In your mind's eye, just see if you can notice yourself, watching yourself from across the room. And now I'd like you to think of an event from last summer. Perhaps it was a party or some activity with friends or family, or maybe it was just a quiet time alone. It doesn't matter. Just an event from last summer. When you have that event in your mind, try to make it more into a movie. Put it in motion. See who was there. See what you were doing. See what others were doing. Were you inside or outside? What was the environment like? Was it warm or was it cool? Was it daytime or was it nighttime? Just put it in motion for a moment and just notice. And notice yourself in your movie from last summer. You were there then, and you are here now. Just notice that. And now, if you're willing, I'd like you to think of a time when you were a teenager. And perhaps you can see yourself as a teen. Notice that your body was different as a teenager from what it is now. Your body has changed, but you, the you that took its first breath, are not your body. You are the same today as you were last summer and as you were as a teen. You've had many different body sensations over your life. You are not them. You've had many different emotions since last summer and since you were a teen. Emotions come and go, and you're not your emotions. And you've had thousands and thousands and thousands of thoughts since last summer, and even more since you were a teenager. And what you thought then is different than what you think now. What you knew then is different than what you know now. But you, the you that took its first breath, are not your thoughts. You are you. Now, with your eyes still closed, see in your mind's eye the room you're in. And see once again you at the other side of the room watching yourself sitting in your chair. Just focus on that for a moment. Who is the you here? Just experience this for a moment. And when you're ready, reorient to your room and take a deep breath in and open your eyes. Any comments on that experience about the you? The you in the eye view is the same you looking at yourself from across the room. It's the same you looking at yourself from last summer. And it's the same you looking at yourself as a teenager. It doesn't change. And you aren't your thoughts, you aren't your emotions. And that same you is the observing you. It can be your coach, if you will. But that same you can view the world and can view all the sensations and feelings that you're having as you experience that world, and can view all of the thoughts and things that your mind is saying in response to the world, and you can see them separate from that sort of fused connection with them. You can be separate when you take this I view perspective. And more important than even that, you can see yourself from this perspective, whether you're moving towards struggling with fear and anxiety, or you're moving towards valued action. Okay? And that's a really helpful thing to practice and to use. Yes, Bill asks, is you a detached, objective observer? Absolutely. It's being a bit detached. It's taking that same perspective as you were when you were, almost just being born, and taking in information through your five senses just as the information is. Just totally objective. No judgment. Good, bad, yes, no, right, wrong. No judgment about that. Just totally objective. Okay? And when we start to label good, bad, when we start to label with judgments, we aren't detached any longer. We get fused. We're not defused, we're fused. And this you, the you that took its first breath, the observer you, the detached, objective observer, is the you that can do this. Okay? All right, I realize the time is getting late here, and I can only do so much. I can only pack so much into this, but I want to now talk a little bit about dealing with some of the urges to cut and run. Okay? There's many ways to deal with the avoidance urge, and I encourage you to be mindful about it and use the I view. It's really powerful perspective. And keep in mind the question that you can ask yourself, given what's important, what am I willing to do? What am I willing to accept and experience to move in a direction that I know is meaningful for me? Okay? But I know that there are times that it's really difficult. And so to face the discomfort, it's just natural that we want to cut and run. And I suggest, first and foremost, be patient and be kind to yourself. Remember, evaluation really adds nothing to the experience. And when I say evaluation, we always have that critical voice in our mind saying, you idiot, why didn't you stay in that trade longer? Or you idiot, why didn't you get out sooner? That's not helpful. So be more patient and be more kind with yourself, and use that I view objective observer to realize that it's your mind saying to you that you're an idiot, and the truth is absolutely that you're not an idiot, okay? And the skills that we've talked about today, the mindfulness, the I view, all of these things all go against the old habits, but they're all different ways of thinking. And as we started out with Einstein, we need a different way of thinking than what we're used to. That's what that's created the problem. Tom asks, is lack of confidence in what you see in your setups a manifestation of fear? I think, Tom, it's probably more that you don't know with certainty that your setups have a given probability. That for example, a selling climax followed by a test within a few bars where all the lows are higher than the previous low. And then we have that nice narrow range, really low volume test. That's a high odds trade. That's a high probability trade. And if I know that that trade has, let's say, a 70% probability, and you should know your probabilities, and if you don't know your probabilities, go back and paper trade those, and go back and look at 6 months worth of data, intraday data, and see what those probabilities actually are, and see what your probabilities are in trading those. That's why practice trading is so helpful and so effective and builds confidence. But here, confidence is more in knowing what your setups are. If you don't know that, then you have uncertainty. And we talked about this in the last session. We talked about the paradox of trading, that on any given trade setup, we never know what the outcome is going to be. The outcome is always uncertain on any individual trade. Yet, over a large number of trades with a given edge, there is a probability that we will be profitable. There's this in the case that we're talking about. There's a 70% win-loss ratio of being profitable. So 70% of those trades of a selling climax with a particular kind of test in a short-term rising market, 70% of those are going to work out to be profitable. 30% are going to be unprofitable. So if we know that, then we should not have a question about whether we can be confident in that trade or not. And as long as we take the perspective that we're trading over the long haul, many trades, and not hanging on the outcome of any and every given trade. If we're focused on the outcome of every trade, we're on one side of the paradox. I talked about this in the last session. We're on that side of the paradox where the outcome is uncertain if we're only focused on that one individual trade. And if we're on that side of the paradox where a given trade is uncertain, it's a scary place to be. So it's going to manifest fear, no question about it. If we're on the other side of the paradox, which is over a large sample of trades, I have a given probability, and that probability will produce a profit, then we can be confident in that. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Okay, let's go back now to to dealing with urges to cut and run. Here's a couple of suggestions about that. And I'll do these fairly quickly because I want to get to one more last point. Put your thoughts and urges on index cards, on that observing self form where you separated your thoughts and your sensations and your actions. You can put your thoughts and your sensations, take those and put them on index cards. When they show up, just like we did in the leaf example, we label them and we put them on a card instead of a leaf. Okay? And now you've got a choice to do what the card says, move towards struggle with fear, move towards suffering with fear, or you can choose to move towards a valued trading action. Putting that thought or feeling on a card, on an index card, and setting it down in front of you is like taking it out of your head and putting it out there arm's length. It's like taking it out of your head and placing it on the stream, okay? I'm sorry, on the leaf that's on the stream, and letting it go down. But instead of letting it go down, now we can make the choice. Do I want to move towards struggle, or do I want to move towards value? Okay? And just to get a sense of the struggle, here's a cool little thing to do. Just take that card and place it between your palms and push hard. Push really, really hard for 30 seconds. And struggle with it, 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 and push really, really up, push even harder. Notice what's happening while you do this. And the point is that you're getting nowhere with that struggle, all right? You're not pushing one way or the other. Then just place it down on your lap or on your desk where it really belongs, outside in a place that is where you can have that eye view of it, where where you can be objective and detached. Placing it outside of you is detaching from you, okay? And here's another metaphorical thing. Take a few cards and take them with you during the day. Put them in your pocket. Look at them every once in a while. The metaphor there is that they're always with you. These thoughts are always with you. Why not take them along for the ride? Okay? I do this with traders, and believe it or not, they actually like it. It may sound a little bit strange, and we're not working one-on-one here. We're doing this kind of in a presentation format, and I'm really distant from you over the internet. So it may seem strange, but I encourage you to try it. And it's like everything else I've encouraged you to think about and do, from not feeding the tiger to dropping the rope to putting your thoughts on leaves in a stream. It's all wild stuff. It's all crazy kind of, if you said this out to anybody else in your everyday life, it would seem really crazy. This is another one of those crazy things too, but there's a purpose behind it, and the purpose is metaphorical. And think about it as you're doing this, and you'll see the point of it, and it'll hit home for you. That's all I can promise you with that. It always does when with traders that I work with when I do this. They find it pretty helpful, in fact. Another suggestion is to surf your emotions. Ooh, that sounds like a cool thing. If you think about emotions, they're all wave-like. They build up. They reach a crest. Sometimes they feel like a tsunami, but they do reach a crest, and then they die down. Okay? They ebb and they flow, just like the waves of an ocean. And if you ever noticed like a group of seagulls floating on the waves, they don't fight those waves, right? They just sit there and float, and as the wave crests up, they rise up the leading edge of the wave, and they come to the top of it, and then they gradually come down, right? Well, you can ride your waves of emotion. You can surf them using the eye view perspective and using the subjective units of distress rating scale and comparing this wave from the last wave and say, oh, this wave is a little stronger than the last wave that I had. The last one was only a 4. This one's a 6. You can ask from the you that took its first breath, you can say, which way do I want to move now? Do I want to move towards struggle, or do I want to move towards valued behavior? Valued behavior, in this instance, since it's a wave that you've never surfed, a large wave like this, you can be curious about this and say, can I really surf this wave? Or if it's a wave that you're rating through your SUD scale, your SUD scale, less than a bigger wave that you've ridden in the past, you can note that as well from that perspective. Okay? So those are two additional suggestions on how to deal with the sometimes difficult urges to cut and run. And now before we leave, I want to talk about this. This is pretty important as well. I mean, there's so many different things that are really important in this, that it's hard to cram as much as, compress as much as I can into this. But this is an important one, and I want you to get this. And this form, by the way, that you see here is also in your workbook. You want to put a valued trading behavior into action. You always want to do that, okay? Think about putting behaviors into action. It's a really important concept to do. But go in small steps. Don't try to do it all at once, okay? Here's the process that you can follow. Identify the valued action that you want to put in place. And you've made that list, or if you haven't done that in the workbook exercise from last session, you have the opportunity to do that. So pick one of those, identify one of those actions you want to put in place, and now break it down into manageable, specific parts. Okay? Don't try to do it all at once. Make a plan to put it in place, and then do it mindfully and record the results. So let's do a quick example here. Here's a trader whose valued trading behavior on this form is holding on to holding a trade open to the profit objective. Okay? So he's broken this down now, or I should say she's broken this down now into a short-term goal. This is an actual example from a client that I had, and it actually is a she. She broke this down to a short-term goal with a specific trading behavior. She said, I'm going to extend my average profit on a given trade by 1 point. It's not holding the trade open for lots and lots of points. She was a Russell E-mini trader, but she's just going to hold it open by 1 point. Her long-term goal associated with this behavior was to hold the position open until a VSA indication of reversal appeared. Okay? But that's her long-term goal. It's not the short-term goal that she's working on now. So the specific behavior to be added or changed to achieve the short-term goal, and she says, after my trade entry and setting my stop, I will set a limit order to exit 1 point more than my average profit for that given trade. Okay, pretty specific. Remember, behavioral terms, we always want to be specific and measurable. She can measure this. Did she do it or did she not do it? So what will I do to support this new behavior? She says, I know this will be difficult. Once the trade has reached average profit, I will move my stop to break even. That's practical. She's thinking pragmatically. That's a good thing to do. Okay, it can reduce some of the stress. There's no problem in doing that. So and it's a sound trading behavior anyway, protecting either your profits or your losses when appropriate. Okay, so once it's reached an average profit, she's going to bring it to break even. Then she says, also to support this new behavior, I'll remember to stop feeding the tiger, and I'll use the I view and observe my thoughts and emotions. If it's needed, I will surf my fear. Okay? Now, on this form, there are areas for you to record situations that occur that relate to this, valued trading behavior that you're putting into place. And she had one here. I put the date wrong. It's a date in advance, but it was actually in March of last year. And she rated her distress level or discomfort level as a 6 on the SUD scale, same scale that I gave you. And the situation that caused her to rate this in this manner was a long trade after a selling climax. Okay? And she says about the actions taken, it wasn't easy at first. I immediately did start to observe my thoughts and feelings. I noticed my muscle tension most. See, she's mindful here. She's noticing things. And also that my hands trembled. She noticed that as well. A strong physiological response. She said, I noticed the thought, I'm going to lose, I'm going to lose. And it was repeating nonstop over and over again. So very mindfully, she was noticing this. Now, right? Just pause here for a second and think back to times when you exited a trade. Are you noticing that the muscle tension in a mindful way is present, or that your hands might be trembling, or whatever the physiological response is? Are you noticing your thoughts? The likelihood is no. Okay? And this is one of the first steps in gaining control over your behavior, is to notice things and to write them down. So she does that. And she says, when I got to my normal profit level, my mind said, just take the normal profit. That will be best. Don't be an idiot. Just take your profit. Minds are minds, aren't they? And that's just exactly what we would expect from our minds at that point. And it would be urgent, too. Just take that normal profit. Don't take a loss. She says she felt fear and pretty nervous. But she also noticed every bar was closing up. Here's the thing. By being more mindful, she's not only noticing what's going on internally, she can also, from that eye view perspective, she can also notice what's going on in the world. She can notice what's going on in the world of her trading, which is the bars on her chart. That's her world, right? I was more fearful when price came back a bit. Very observant. She was noticing when her subjective units of distress were going up or down. When the bars came back on her position a little bit, or when the price came back on her position a little bit, she noticed her SUDS ratings going a little bit higher. She was more fearful. More observation. Setting the stop to break even was helpful. And in this case, she got the extra point. She says, I was surprised to get the extra point. I felt pretty good after that. Now, even if the trade didn't come out good, even if it went all the way back and she just, had broke even. She didn't make anything. She didn't lose anything. She still won. Why did she win? Because she was able to observe all of this, and she was able to act in the service of her valued trading behavior, extending her average profit by 1 point. She was able to act despite having negative thoughts, despite having trembling hands, despite feeling the fear. She was still able to notice all of that and mindfully notice what was going on in her world, what was going on in her charts, and she was able to mindfully say to herself, I'm going to set my stop to break even, and I'm going to go for that 1 point because I'm going for valued behavior rather than going towards suffering with the fearful thoughts and the fearful feelings. Okay? So this is a really important and really useful exercise for you to do. I've given you an awful lot of stuff here today. We've reviewed a little bit about what we talked about last time. We talked about fusion. avoidance, evaluation, reason giving, all combining to be negative or make it difficult for us to handle fear. But we talked importantly that fear and emotions and thoughts don't go away. Tiger Woods, Captain Sullenberger all had the same stuff going on in their performance activities of golf and landing that plane in the Hudson, all right? But they still were able to act anyway. And I've taught you now several different ways to think about mindfulness. We've talked about the role of mindfulness and how it helps us diffuse from our thoughts, how to separate ourselves, decenter, become more, as Bill said, detached and objective about what's going on, not just in our thoughts, but in our world as well. We've talked about different mindfulness activities, including separate mindfulness, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on words here, separate times that we choose to set aside and in a quiet location where we won't be disturbed, practice our mindfulness. And I gave you last week and this week 3 different ways to do that. We've talked about bringing mindfulness into everyday trading activities when we prepare for the next day, when we're annotating charts, when we're practicing our trading. Be mindful in that. Notice where our thoughts go. Notice where our feelings go. And when they go and wander off, bring them gently back to the task at hand. That's just practice, but important practice on how to continue to be mindful. We talked about how the fear doesn't go away, but the sensations don't go away and the thoughts don't go away. But through mindfulness, the impact of those thoughts and those sensations and those feelings become less and less on our trading and our everyday life if we want them to be. This is not just for trading, by the way. This is stuff that you can use every single day in all different kinds of roles that you have, not just the role of being a trader. We talked about the I view, even how it's important to recognize that you got to be willing to experience some of this stuff. It's an important part of it. But mindfulness, again, helps you in that willingness. We talked about a really unique way to look at things, and that's the I view. We talked about how to break your thoughts up and your feelings up and not have them all smushed together and difficult to understand. I brought you through the experience of the observant you, the detached you, the you that took its first breath, the you that's really never changed throughout your whole life, even though lots of other stuff in your body has changed, your thoughts have changed, your surroundings have changed, but you, there's this constant you, we call it even the transcendent you, and that's the you from the I view, and that's the you that can see what's going on in your body, what's going on in your mind, what's going on in your world, and can make the decision about whether you want to move back into fear and suffering or you want to move towards valued behavior. Touch a couple of ways to deal with that urge to, get out of the fearful situation, using those index cards and as a metaphor for pulling the thoughts and feelings out of your head and out of your body. And we talked a little bit about how to surf the fear, the emotions of fear, and using the subjective units of distress, the SUD scale, to do that. And one of the most important things we talked about is what I talked about last, and that's how to put trading value into action, identify that valued action you want to put into place from your list, break it down into manageable parts, go take small steps. Don't try to do it all at once. Make a plan to do that, and we went through this exercise about how this woman made a plan to do it, and then do it mindfully and record the results. Okay? And we did that through the example. And again, I guess I took you over time, but I apologize for doing that. We got a late start, but I wanted you to get as much of this as I could possibly get out to you. So I want to thank you for being a great group and having great questions, and people have emailed me with questions, and those have been great. And if you have questions, because we'll bring this to a close in a moment or two, send me the email. It's drgary@peakpsychology.com, and I will get back to you as quickly as I can. And just note on the top of the email, particularly if you have not emailed me before, just note fear seminar or trade guider seminar or something along those lines, because I get lots and lots of emails every single day, and I want to pick yours out to be able to respond to it early on, rather than missing it or not getting to it right away. And Chip asks, will you email the workbook for the session? Yes, I will. I think I emailed it to most people. Chip, I must have missed you. Oh, I know why I did, because I emailed you something different before. Okay, I will email that to you. You'll get the workbook. And Renee, I don't think I have your email address. If you haven't sent it in already, do that for me, and I'll get you all the stuff. So if there are any questions, I'll take a moment or two to answer any questions that you've come up. Okay, Ernest, you better email me your email if you haven't done that already too, because I don't think I have yours. I'll wait a moment here for questions, if anybody has any questions. Okay, good. Thanks, Ernest. I'll get that out to you then. I am not seeing any questions. And so, Renee, you need to email it to me, because I'm not going to be able to get that off of this chat room. Okay, yeah, thanks. Okay, good. Okay, again, thank you very much, and thank Trade Guider, Richard, and Gavin, and I thank you all, and I really hope that you got something out of this. That was the intent, and any feedback is great to Gavin or Richard, and certainly to myself. And with that, I guess we'll end it, and again, thank you, and have a good rest of the weekend, folks.